Hey everyone, VortexTCG here. For the longest time since I've decided to change my approach on the channel, there have been a lot of comments talking about, can we do a deck profile on this deck, or can we talk about the new support coming out in this set? And for the most part, I haven't had really a good enough chance to talk about new cards or new decks as a whole, other than my big videos. And because of that, it made me start to think about what I could potentially do to fix this issue. The fix for me was, well, right in front of me, quite frankly, and that is the return of First Draft. If you don't remember what First Draft was on this channel, essentially it was just a rundown of all the new support or the new deck and give you my first draft of the deck, so you guys have a good idea of how to start building the deck. And so I thought it would be a good idea to start the series with a deck that people have been asking for quite a while, quite frankly. It is one of the most popular videos on this channel. I'm obviously talking about Blue Flare. Blue Flare is a very interesting deck because it has quite an interesting identity. It is a Digicross deck that essentially just rushes down your opponent completely while also struggling in certain aspects. I mean, the deck has had a bit of an identity crisis sometimes with the EX4 support, and more now with the BT19 support, which we'll get into soon. So what are we doing is talking about the new support and giving you my first draft on the deck. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk about the brand new cards within the BT19 Blue Flare support, give you my thoughts and kind of what the game strategy is for this support, and then talk about my first draft of the deck. So let's talk about some of the new cards in Blue Flare. So the first one is going to be the level 3 Gaussmon, and this just has a rather simple effect. On play and on deletion, you place a Blue Flare Digimon card from underneath one of your tamers and draw an additional card. This is just a rather simple effect, and it's got some nice cycling attached to it. What you'll see in the BT19 support is that putting stuff underneath your tamers outside of save and stuff like that is actually quite important, because the archetype tends to digivolve into it from underneath its tamers, and also play stuff from underneath its tamers. So for that reason, the Gaussmon in the BT19 support is actually rather effective. And even in the grander scheme of Blue Flare, it is still a really good card in my opinion, because quite frankly, just being able to cycle cards in Blue Flare is really nice, and it's not like you're losing them. The only downside to this is that you might not have a tamer at that time, but hopefully by turn 2 you'll have a tamer. So I think this card is actually really good, just generically within the deck. Pretty decent start. What about the level 4s? Greymon has pretty simple effect overall. It has rush, and then on deletion, if you have one or fewer tamers in play, you get to play a Kiriha for free, and then you get to save this Digimon. Then it also has inherited effect of reboot. Now I remember when this support was actually getting revealed to us, and everyone was kind of like, oh my god, no, we don't need Blue Flare getting rush and everything like that. But I think now that we've had time in the 2.5 meta and just seeing Japan meta like evolve over time, this card hasn't really achieved much. Obviously the upside to this card is insane. You get a security check, you get to play a tamer, you get to save, and then you're able to fuel it up for the next turns. It's all good on paper, but unfortunately when it comes to the BT19 support, getting the rush off is quite difficult, and with other cards in the archetype before BT19, like the Gaussmon from BT10, it comes in suspended, so the rush is a little bit weird. Obviously in the best case scenario, it is really good, but I think overall, for more consistency, you'd rather just do a search, or potentially, you know, get like a Metal Greymon back essentially. So the idea of this Greymon is nice, but I just think it's a little bit too slow and a little bit clunky in the archetype as a whole. Then we get into probably what I think is the worst card in this archetype by far, and it is the Mailbirdramon. Mailbirdramon is a blocker, and then on deletion you may place one Digimon card with the Blue Flare trait from your trash under any of your tamers, then save. Then it has the inheritable of blocker. Yeah, so you can kind of see what's happening happening with the BT19 support. It's trying to be more defensive. It's trying to, you know, stop your opponent from, you know, being able to swing, blocking, rebooting, all that good stuff. However, my issue with that kind of stuff is that there is already a Digi-Cross deck that does that better, and that is obviously Dark Knightmon. Seeing this like meld into like a more defensive deck is not what I was expecting, and the problem with the Mailbirdramons in general is that all the Mailbirdramons have been insanely good. You know, one gives jamming, one gives a return, well, a stun essentially if your opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play. So for that reason, it's kind of hard to justify playing this card. Blocker is nice, but reality is that you're playing, you know, a huge swing turn deck, and the blocker isn't really going to come up that much. You're not going to be playing this out for free because, well, it's difficult to do that. So yeah, I think the Mailbirdramon is not good in its BT19 state, and also insanely awful in Blue Flare as a whole. So let's talk about the big guy himself, which is the Metal Greymon. Metal Greymon has Material Save 2, like all the other Metal Greymons, and it also has, on play, this Digimon gains Rush for the turn. Also important to note that the Digi-Cross requirements are a Blue Greymon and a Mailbirdramon. So when attacking of this card is Digivolve 1, of your opponent's Digimon, and then this Digimon may Digivolve into a Blue Flare trait Digimon from under your tamers without paying the cost. And then it has an inheritable of end of attack. Once per turn, you may play 1 level 4 or lower Digimon card with the Blue Flare trait from under your tamers without paying the cost. So this is the huge payoff that this deck has for putting stuff underneath your tamers. You're able to play a level 4 out, and then you're also able to Digivolve for free into a level 6. It sounds really good on paper, and it probably is if you play a pure BT19 version of this deck, but the problem with this card is that, you know, getting the things set up before you're able to do this is a little bit slow. You know, essentially what you're doing here is that you need to get guaranteed 2 bodies underneath a tamer to prepare. So if you have like Gaussmon and the tamer, which we'll get into in a bit, it is possible, but my issue is that I just don't think the payoff is worth it. Obviously, you know, playing a level 4 and Digivolving into level 6 sounds really good on paper, but it's very inconsistent at the best of times. For that reason, it's kind of a bit of a weird one. Obviously, the Digivolve 1 is very nice because if they have aces, you just gain memory back, and that's very important. Additional disruption that you have is quite nice. And I do think that this Metal Greymon is the second best Metal Greymon we have. We don't talk about the EX4 one. So yeah, I think while there is some downsides and consistency issues with this card specifically, I think that this card does enough in the game state for it to be worthwhile. The idea of this is that you play the level 4 Greymon, you swing, you get an additional swing, wow, huge value. But I think there's better value in playing stuff like the BT10 Greymon, which allows you to search, or, you know, at play a Mailbirdramon to give a Ice Wall type effect, or just the normal Mailbird, which allows you to return a Metal Grey. There are some interesting things with this card, and I think the partner of this card is not in this BT19 support. So yeah, I think this card is actually not that bad. Probably the second best Metal Greymon you can be playing in the Blue Flare deck. So in BT19, we're also getting a Z Greymon, and this is what the Z Greymon does. On play and when Digivolving, you get to de-Digivolve to one of your opponent's Digimon. Then if your opponent has 2 or more Digimon, return one of their level 4 Digimon to the hand. Now, it's on deletion effect. You may play 1 Blue Flare or Crossheart trait Digimon card with a play cost of 5 or less from under your tamers without paying the cost, and then save. And also has the inheritable of gaining 2k DP. Yeah, a bit of a disappointing card if I'm being honest. Look, the idea behind this card is obviously very simple. You know, if they have a level 6, you swing with the Z Grey, you're then able to Digivolve it twice, and then hopefully you're able to, you're able to get the Metal Grey Digivolve so they go to a 5, and then you Digivolve twice, go to a level 3, and then, well, you're able to essentially return it back to hand. Obviously the combo's there and it works well, but I won't say it works well, but I would say like it's just a bit underwhelming as a whole. I think that the BT11 Z Greymon is miles better because you'll get the unsuspend, which is the most key factor in the deck, quite frankly, and then you'll also gain 2 memory if your opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, and the 2 memory matters a lot. And with the previous Mailbirdramon, like I mentioned, the Digivolve into it is free. So essentially, if you're able to Digivolve into the BT11 Z-Gray, gain 2 memory, well, you just need 1 more memory to do another Mailbirdramon turn, which is closer to game. So I think this Z-Greymon just doesn't hit the mark, and the on-deletion effect of playing a guy out and then saving is not great, because you're essentially going to be, there's going to be a delete on your opponent's turn most probably, so you're then able to play something out like the Greymon, but the Greymon doesn't matter if it has rush anymore because you've already played it out on your opponent's turn and it passes to yours. So it's a bit of a weird one. I don't really like it that much. I'd rather play the BT11 Zeke Greymon. And then we get into the Tamer, Kiriha. And Kiriha is a free cost tamer, which is the first one I believe in this archetype, and it has the following effect. By placing 1 Digimon card with the blue flare or cross heart traits from your hand underneath any of your tamers, gain 1 memory. And then it has the standard Digicross requirement of, if you Digicross, you can suspend this tamer to use the cards underneath your tamers as for a Digicross. Yeah, it's a bit disappointing to say the least, because I think what would have really helped this card is that you also got a draw 1, and I think it would still be very balanced if you were able to draw a card from that effect, essentially. So the idea is obviously simple. You use the Gaussmons and the Kiriha to fuel your tamers up, essentially, and then when you're able to go into the Metal Grey, you swing, you use the sources underneath them, and then you're able to, go to the races, essentially. My issue with this support is that it feels very confused to what the other support is trying to do. If you look at the BT10 support, the EX4 support, I guess less so the EX4 support, because it's supposed to make Grey Knightmon, is that what it's called? No one ever made that card, essentially, but it feels like there's a bit of an identity crisis with this support, because essentially what this does is it's a very defensive playstyle that has bursts of aggression in it. It just doesn't come together, and if they wanted to do a defensive style support line, it'd probably need another set of support to even work, essentially. And I just feel like there are certain cards that just do the job better and we already have access to them. There's no point in playing the Mailbirdramon when you have Kiriha and Nene as a dual tamer. Is there really a need for Rush Greymon when you have, well, BT10 Metal Greymon, and then you're able to put Red Greymon and the jamming Mailbirdramon and swing twice? I just don't think it does enough, quite frankly. And that's the problem with this support. There are some things that just do are really good in the archetype here, like the Metal Greymon and the Gaussmon are, I would say, pretty standout cards. Greymon is okay, the Mailbird and the Z-Grey are rather disappointing, and the Kiriha is just obviously designed for a different type of support. So when it comes to the first draft, I ended up looking back at what made the deck pretty good overall. So I looked back at the videos that I did previously on BT10 and EX4 support, and I feel like I've come up with something that is worthy of a first draft. So let's talk about the first draft. So here is the first draft of the deck. So I'm going to go over these pieces pretty quickly overall, but just to give you an idea of what we're doing here in this deck. So the egg, Wanyamon, is the only real good blue egg that's generic that you can play in this deck, and you're always guaranteed to essentially get the draw 1 most of the time, so it's pretty good for that reason you play it. Gaussmon is still the best rookie in this deck. I mean, being able to play a Greymon, a Mailbird, it's just really good overall. Just getting consistency or returning pieces or doing a little ice wall effect is pretty decent overall, so we do play 4 of it. It's a nice aggressive card for the deck. Then we have a brand new card in the Gaussmon BT19. This is just a way that we can cycle, and sometimes cycling is quite nice, and getting stuff under tamers is also quite nice. So we use that to our advantage quite a lot, just gaining some additional cycle, and this deck can always use more cycling, so we play 3 of it. Then we have the Ukomon package here. I mean, this deck doesn't really need these rookies. You can change these out if you want, but I just like a little bit more consistency and a little bit more aggression. It works out pretty well. The search and then, hatch another egg for the Ukomons is quite nice, especially if you want to get a Gaussmon on the following turn and push your advantage further. So the additional swings can add up, so I like to play these at 3. 2 of the BT16 and 1 of the Pro. Then we have the starter deck Greymon. I think this is the only deck that uses it now, but there's a good reason for that essentially. Security attack +1 is nice, and the BT10 Metal Greymon specifically says Greymon, not Blue Greymon. So for that reason, we can put this underneath the Greymon, Metal Greymon, and then swing 2 additional times. For that reason, it is very effective, so we play 3 of it. Then we have the 4 BT10 Greymon. This is just your searcher and can also unsuspend if your opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play. This is a very effective, nice search, and then you can also return the Metal Greymon if you need to, and then you also have the unsuspend. So this is probably the best card outside of the Metal Greymons, so you do play 4 of it. Mailbirdramon is good. In this deck, you play 3 of it. It allows you to play a Tamer for free, but you're not really going to be using that effect quite often. What you will be using this for is returning a Metal Greymon if you have a Kiriha in play. It's just a nice recycling effect that you can do, and it's very effective for that. And also the inheritable of stopping something from attacking or blocking until the end of your opponent's turn is quite nice, especially as it's hard to stun big stacks in this deck outside of this card, so we play 3 of it. Then we have Mailbirdramon. This is just a simple, decent card for this deck. The combination of this and the Greymon just essentially means 2 swings at security for free. On play, allows you to do a Ice Wall type effect on the lowest level, which is quite nice, and the jamming is obviously really good, so we play 3 of it. Then we get into our level 5s. We play 4 of the BT10 Metal Greymon. This is still the best one. It allows you to get Rush, and then if you're Digi-crossing, which you always are, you essentially can stun 3 of your opponent's Digimon with Digi-Evolution cards less than or equal to this Digimon's Digi-Evolution cards, and they can't attack or block until the end of your opponent's turn. This is a good stall card, but it's also a very aggressive card as well in the deck, so you play 4 of it in the deck. Then we have 2 Zudamon. This is still a decent card in the deck, I feel, because there isn't really much disruption, and one of the biggest problems with this deck is that Medieval Gallantmon is a card, so we kind of need a small out to the card, quite frankly, and Zudamon does that. Probably not well, but we just sometimes need to just bounce it and then go for game, and this card can help you with that, so we play 2 of it in the deck. Then we have 2 of the brand new Metal Greymon for BT19. This is still the second best Metal Greymon, and you can do some interesting things with this card. You can go into, for example, the Z Grey that we're playing here for free, and then you can also gain 2 memory if your opponent has 2 Digimon on the field. So in that way, you're essentially able to, go into a guy, unsuspend, so you can get another swing in, and then you're also able to play a level 4 out, so you can play something like the Greymon or the Mailbirdramons to recycle or search. And in that regard, I think it's actually not that bad. So we play 2 of it as our secondary Metal Greymon for the deck. The only problem I have with this card is that it says Blue Greymon. Unfortunately, that means we can't use the Red Greymon, which sucks. Then we have 2 of the BT11 Z Greymon. This essentially is just an unsuspend that you can do, and if your opponent has 2 or more Digimon cards in play, well, you gain 2 memory, and the 2 memory is actually quite nice, quite frankly. The inheritable doesn't matter. The on deletion save is quite nice because you get to save this card specifically, so you can recycle it for another Metal Grey BT19 turn, but you're also able to then save a Mailbird and a Greymon. So in that regard, it's pretty good. You play 2 of it. This card doesn't really need much explanation, but it actually works well in this deck, even though it does well against this deck as well. It's just a good floodgate for a lot of decks, and you can answer a lot of things with this card alone. And as you're playing a bunch of Digimon out, you can trigger the effect quite frequently on your opponent on your turn. So for that reason, you play 2 of this in the deck. Then we have the Tamer lineup of Kiriha and then Kiriha Nene. Kiriha is the set to free, Kiriha Nene is the game on memory if there's 2 or more Digimon in play. Most notably, this one allows you to Digicross from trash as well, which is going to be quite nice for if they get into the trash for some reason. Maybe you can't material save them all. So we go 3-4 split, we don't play any of the new Tamer. We obviously play the best searcher in the deck, which is the Blazing Memory Boost. Just essentially look at top 6, add 2 cards, and then get to play a Kiriha for free. Really good value, so we play it. And then finishing off the deck, we have Ice Wall. Ice Wall's generically good, does everything you need to do to slow the game down. And then we have 3 Sorai, which definitely slows the game down quite a bit if they don't have any sources. Also, this has just gotten a lot better over time because, quite frankly, it's quite... there's like quite a few aces going around currently in the game, so just being able to trash sources that have like aces in them is quite nice. And it says trash the top 4, so it's pretty much guaranteed if there is a ace in the sources to get rid of that. So we play 3 Sorai to slow down your opponent. And that was my first draft on BT19 Blue Flare. I really do love this deck, and it kind of sucks to see that this new support, in my opinion, just doesn't do enough for the archetype. It really moves it towards a different direction of control, which I think the deck was originally supposed to be, but ended up being a very aggressive deck. And I don't really like playing this as a defensive deck because, well, I have Dark Knight for that, so it feels kind of a bit meh in my opinion. And because of that, I feel like the support actually falls flat on its face. But what do you think of the BT19 Blue Flare? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is there any interesting builds that you're coming up with? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all for watching this episode of First Draft. If you're excited for the return of First Draft on the channel, let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode.